Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to meet a candidate for U.S. Congress, someone who has some new ideas and some old ideas. So why don't we start with an introduction?
Thanks, Al. My name is Jason Poulos. I'm from Sherburne, Massachusetts. I'm not a politician. I've never run for office before. I'm an academic researcher, so I've done a PhD in political science at UC Berkeley, and I grew up here in the district, in Sherburne actually, and I came back to Massachusetts to do a postdoc at Harvard Medical School. I'm a lifelong product of public education. I went to Dover-Sherburne Regional High School. I went to UMass Amherst. I've been a union member twice at Harvard and at UC Berkeley, and I'm running for Congress because I'm very concerned about the impact of artificial intelligence on our society and our economy. So my academic background is in artificial intelligence and policy research. And we're just looking at some of the layoff numbers. Oracle laid off 20,000 workers last month, and they said that human labor is no longer important to us. We have to build more data centers to fuel our AI models. And last year, 50,000 workers were laid off, and it's estimated about 7% of the entire workforce, both blue-collar and white-collar workers, are going to be displaced due to AI. And so we really need some strong, robust, universal programs to protect workers from these effects. And so that's why I think Medicare for All is really important. So we have to decouple health insurance with employment. We have 27 million people in this country uninsured, and we spend among the highest of the industrialized nations on health care, and we receive middling health outcomes as a result.
Now, I got to ask you, when you say decouple it because they're uninsured,
Mm-hmm.
is it really uninsured or not effectively insured? Because somebody gets a cold.
Right.
If you're my family, you rush the kids right down to the urgent care or the physician, they take care of it. If you don't have any insurance, you let it go until it goes into pneumonia, and then you go to the emergency room.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd never understood, I mean, you can get health care.
Right.
It's just you're paying for chronic health care instead of early on health care.
Right. So the problem is when people are uninsured, they use the emergency room as their primary care effectively, and that's not socially optimal because taxpayers end up footing the bill for that. And it's not optimal in terms of healthcare outcomes because we should really be focusing on preventative care. So people should be going to see the doctor even if they feel healthy. And so Medicare for All would make sure that everyone had access to a primary care physician. It would also alleviate some of the stress on local and state budgets. So Milford, for instance, wouldn't have to pay for health insurance for its local employees. Small business owners in Milford wouldn't have to worry about paying health insurance to their employees. It's very costly to insure workers for health care. And when people are asked in Massachusetts what are the top 5 costs that are driving up their cost of living, health insurance is usually number 3 or 4. And so it would take that out of the equation. And it would also alleviate some of the financial burdens of local government so that they can fund, for instance, construction of new schools.
Well, I remember when we were living in France, I thought socialized medicine was the best thing in the world. Everybody had it, and we had Blue Cross, American Blue Cross. So if we needed to get to a doctor, they took us right away because they got fully paid. My wife's girlfriends and friends could wait months. So I worry sometimes, after living through it, can you pull it off?
Yeah, so this would be a single-payer health insurance program. So the doctors in the hospitals would functionally remain the same. It would just be, instead of the bill going to your private insurance like Blue Cross, it would be going to the federal government. And that's advantageous in several ways. One way is that it's estimated that a Medicare for All system would save the country as a whole $450 billion a year in healthcare spending, and that's because the Medicare system has less administrative overhead than private health insurers. So private health insurers have about 20% overhead, and the Medicare program has about 8% overhead. The Congressional Budget Office actually estimated that $650 billion would be saved a
Wow.
year. Yeah, so it would actually save the country as a whole in terms of overall healthcare spending. It would also save about 67,000 lives a year, and that's because people are uninsured.
They wait till the end.
Right, they wait until the end, or they're underinsured, so they don't have, the right or good quality coverage, and so it would end up saving a lot of lives too.
Well, I can see it eliminating a lot of the chronic conditions, because people would go like we do. People who are insured. You feel sick, you go to the doctor or the urgent care. So not putting off care until it's dramatically, a problem. I can see it saving a lot of money. Plus, just the emotional toll. Putting off medical care for your kids because you can't afford it. When you talk to the head of our ER, our emergency room services here, Jeff Hopkins, he'll tell you he doesn't care. He's not looking at you saying, okay, Josh, you feel bad, you got a visa? To him, it's take care of the health problems. But by the time he gets them, it's a lot more serious.
Right, and it would also take pressure off the hospitals. Like around Massachusetts, smaller independent hospitals are closing. There was one in Fall River called St. Anne's that was at risk of being stripped apart by a private equity firm, and it's because under our current profit-driven healthcare model, that hospital was not profitable. So it was more profitable for this equity firm to strip it apart and sell the parts, right? And so what Medicare for All would do is would remove that profit motive from the healthcare industry, and it would protect smaller, more independent hospitals and keep them from closing, because those hospitals would be billing the federal government.
Now, you also talked about a concept of expanding Social Security. What were you thinking of there?
Yeah, so Social Security program can be expanded by eliminating the billionaire tax loophole. So someone like Elon Musk, the ex and Tesla CEO, would pay into the Social Security payroll tax system about 15 minutes into the year, and then he wouldn't be paying the rest of the year. So proportional to his payroll income, he's paying less proportionally than a teacher or a nurse here in Massachusetts. And so I think that's unfair, and by removing this tax ceiling, we can actually expand benefits to $48,000 a year, and that could be funded by just simply removing this payroll tax ceiling.
Well, now, isn't 48,000 about the maximum you can get out of Social Security?
Yeah, so it would expand.
You're saying everybody gets 48 grand?
Under the proposal, yes.
And you would fund that by increasing the amount that high wealth individuals pay?
Right. So So instead of paying a fixed amount, they would be paying proportional to their income throughout the entire year.
So they pay the 7% the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
Because right now, once you get to a certain number, you stop paying.
Right.
I mean, Elon Musk is an example that it's not common,
Right. It's not common, but
but there's a lot
he
of people.
does. I understand he does pay payroll tax. CEOs do pay into the payroll system, but of course there are multimillionaire CEOs, not just billionaires, who hit their tax cap early and are paying less proportionally than
Yeah,
everyone
you've
else.
got people that are like police officers
Right.
making $200,000 a year because of overtime.
Mm-hmm.
They hit the maximum in the middle of the year, or pending. So it would hit a lot of people, not just the multimillionaires.
I'm not,
But would they get more? I mean, right now, the most I think you can get is around $4,500
Mhm.
a month. And it stops at, I don't know what it was before, 178, 180,000 a year. If they're going to pay up to $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, whatever,
Mhm.
would you give them more?
Yeah, so this is a proposal that's in Congress right now. So it's not one that I wrote, but it's one that I think is good, and we should vote for it. And under that program, the entire Social Security program would expand, so the benefits would expand, and it would be funded through the additional tax revenue from removing that tax cap on millionaires and billionaires.
Well, we got to do something, because I'm hearing and reading that in the next 10, 20 years, Social Security runs out of money.
Mm-hmm. And we're spending too much money on war right now. So the last Pentagon budget was $1 trillion, and the proposed Pentagon budget is 1.5 trillion, which is the most we've ever spent on the military since World War II. It's higher than World War II, inflation adjusted. And so we're spending a lot of money, more and more money on war, when we could be spending the money in our own communities in terms of healthcare and education and public transit and fixing our infrastructure, and also protecting programs like Social Security. And the Pentagon itself has failed a federal audit year after year for the past 7 years. It's one of the only agencies to consistently fail a federal audit. And so I think instead of continuing to fund, increase funding for the Pentagon, we should be not increasing the funding. And we should actually be slightly decreasing the funding year after year if it continues to fail a federal budget, because there are a lot of programs that the Pentagon spends billions of dollars on, such as the F-35 program, that has mixed success, and there's not really an accounting of whether the money is being spent properly. And so a lot of this money is being spent into a black hole. And so when we talk about Social Security being at risk, I think we should also be looking at the primary drivers of the federal budget, and Pentagon or military spending is one of those primary drivers.
But the minute you start cutting programs, I mean, I always got a kick out of looking at the supply chain for military suppliers. And the F-35 will have plants in 35, 40 states, which has got to be the most inefficient way,
Yeah.
except for the fact that if you try and cut that program, you're affecting 2/3 of the senators
Right.
who vote on it.
Right. So they put the manufacturing plants strategically in individual members' congressional districts or senators' home states to prevent them from cutting the funding, and they spread it out in such a way that they can build a coalition of politicians.
Yeah, having 35 or 40 plants cannot be as efficient as having 4
Right. Or just one.
or 1. But you turn around and say, Senator, are you ready to put 10,000 of your constituents
Right.
out of work?
Well, yeah, but the way that they build these airplanes, like you said, could it be streamlined and it would be more efficient? Like, this is a kind of system where we're spending $400 on paperweights. The stealth bomber is supposed to be undetectable, but it has been shot down over the skies of Iran, and it wasn't supposed to be doing that. And so I think serious questions have to be asked in Congress about whether Americans' taxpayer money is being spent appropriately.
Well, especially you start looking at the reaction. I'm not saying the programs that were cut by this government were right or wrong, but when they got cut, the minute you cut programs, you start getting the pushback of, well, there's going to be people who don't get vaccinated, there's going to be people who don't get treated. Where do you draw the line? I mean, one of the things on your website says, cut the support to Israel. Well, what we do is we give them bombs, we give them guns. I'm a lot more comfortable with that than giving them boys and girls.
Yeah, so the federal budget is a reflection of the federal government's priorities, and so right now we're prioritizing war, and we're not prioritizing education. We're not prioritizing the future. And President Trump's last budget, he cuts National Science Foundation research funding in half. And so this is a problem because a lot of the new developments, technological developments, drug developments, come from this program. At UC Berkeley, I was funded as a National Science Foundation graduate fellow, and so that's how I got my PhD. And under this program, that entire directorate would be cut out, and so no one like me can ever exist because.
Well, I got to ask you. You
Yeah.
said you did your graduate work, your PhD, at Harvard Med. Poli-sci major at Harvard Med. Where's the connection?
Yeah, so the connection. So at Harvard Medical School, the department was healthcare policy. So it was
okay.
the only non-medical department in the school, and so we were working on statistical type of studies. So one of the studies we were working on was among a population of patients with serious mental illnesses such as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. They have a menu of different types of antipsychotics. How would switching from one antipsychotic that is older and more frequently prescribed to a newer psychotic, like how would that affect their
Now it makes sense.
health outcomes?
I'm a science geek. So, I think in a medical school,
Yeah.
I have to slightly disagree when you say a lot of the fundamental innovations come from the government. It's not a lot. It's like 87% of fundamental research
Right.
is funded by NIH
Right.
because nobody can make money at basic research.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And then if you look at, we were just talking about Elon Musk, a lot of his successes in terms of Tesla, in terms of SpaceX, those are from government contracts. And so the government is footing the bills for a lot of these, technological innovations that end up benefiting society. And so it really is a public good. And without government support into, research, it kind of leaves, a black hole, and that can only be filled by private companies, which aren't always looking at this socially best or socially optimal research plan. They're looking at what's going to make the
Again,
most
not
money.
always. Do they ever?
Well, they're looking at what's going to make the most money short term.
I got a quarter to meet.
Yeah.
I got goals to meet this year.
Right.
My bonus is pegged on meeting the profit margins.
Right.
Where does doing the right thing socially come in their minds?
Yeah, so they're not thinking about the short term. They're not thinking about the long term. They're thinking about the short term profit.
And that's always been one of the problems with the way we're set up, is that everything gets driven by quarterly results. So when you start thinking about investing in fundamental research, it could be things that are going to be 10, 20 years before they show results. What pharmaceutical company is going to go to their stockholders and say, I'm cutting the dividend, I'm cutting the profit this year, but in 20 years I'll do good for the general public? I mean, you got to keep some of that support from the government in there.
Yeah, and that relates to another platform in my agenda, which is we should be strengthening collective bargaining rights for workers, because right now workers are losing power in their companies, and this is becoming increasingly prevalent in an age of artificial intelligence automation. So in New York City, the nurses union went on strike because the corporate hospitals were implementing chatbots for patient intake. So if a patient came in and they were sick, they were greeted with a chatbot to, write in their symptoms and stuff. And so the nurses said, wait, hold on, like, we didn't, approve of this, we don't like it, and we think that there should be some human oversight in this process. And so they went on strike, and they ended up being successful, and the hospitals conceded that the nurses would have, some oversight in the clinical intake.
That's amazing, because I don't know how many times my frustration level gets up when I call in for service, and I end up just saying, human, I want a human. I'm not talking to a stupid computer, because I have a basic question. It's not in the menu that the computer's programmed for, but I guess they don't want to let me go through the computer to a human being.
Right. And the AI models are being deployed in various capacities, such as customer service. But in the clinical setting, it's like more worrying, because these are people's health. People's health are at stake. So if someone comes in and says they have these specific symptoms, then we're not really sure that the AI chatbot is going to lead them in the right direction, right? Because the AI chatbot may not have seen this particular condition before, and so sometimes you really do need a human to overlook this intake process, and so I think there are a lot of areas like that where AI is being used to replace human workers, and it might not be lead to socially desirable outcomes.
Well, in black and white situations, you can program AI perfectly. If this, then that. If then that.
Yeah.
But as you say, when you get into human beings,
Right.
I may have the same 7 symptoms as you do, but I have an 8th.
Right.
And if the AI can't take that into consideration.
And maybe you don't disclose you have a symptom that you have, and the AI doesn't know whether to ask you whether you have that symptom. And so sometimes an experienced nurse or doctor would know to ask the patient, if you have symptoms X, Y, and Z.
But is it growing pains? I mean, I remember when automation first hit the industrial part of the country. Everybody was panicking that we're going to have fully automated car manufacturing and other manufacturing, and there'll be no humans in the plant. After a while, they realized that the automation helped a lot, but you couldn't just have automated systems. You had to have somebody in there with, I won't call it artificial intelligence, but with some intelligence and experience driving it.
Right. So there are definitely situations like in warehouses where you definitely need, humans to look after the robots. And in California, there are dock workers that are going on strike because the companies are trying to put in robots to handle the shipping load. And
Yeah, but I question sometimes and I don't understand enough to have an informed opinion, but the people with the cranes, they're paying crane operators over $200,000 a year. That seems like a lot of money. I mean, there's physicians and all that don't make that.
yeah, well, a lot of these construction and shipping jobs, they're high risk, so they carry a lot of occupational hazard, and so usually the pay would be reflected to account for those hazards.
See, I'm okay with when you say high risk. First responders, like when I see the payroll of our town, the highest payroll is the police. But they're the guys who, when shots are fired, are running this way, giving me the ability to run that way. I have no gripes about paying officers who put their lives on the line over $200,000 a year. But it just strikes me sometimes strange that it seems like the unions are protecting the underachievers.
Well, I think we do need more to increase the union power in this country, because we're in a situation where we're having increasing wealth and income inequality. And I think there are a few ways to counterbalance that, but I think the first way should be to make sure that workers have more voices in their workplaces, and so that they can negotiate better wages, better working situations. In Germany and some other European countries, there's federal law or national law that mandates a certain percentage, like maybe 30% of corporate executive boards be staffed by union members, and I think that's a good idea. We should be making sure that workers have a seat at the table in terms of the type of executive decisions that affect them.
But don't they anyway? I mean, if you're not going to pay workers fairly, you can't get them. So, if they offered a job, I mean, look at Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah.
If they offered positions at $6 an hour, nobody would apply. So when you see them going to 12, 15, I don't believe for a moment it's their social conscience saying we should pay these people a livable wage. It seems that if we don't pay them a certain amount, we aren't going to get any workers.
There are also industries that are kind of gig economy jobs that are short-term kind of contract jobs, such as rideshare drivers. And in Massachusetts, actually, recently there is a newly formed rideshare union. Yeah, and I think it's the first in the country. So I think it will be exciting to see how that works out. But a lot of our economy now is gig type of economy, and where people are taking on multiple jobs and are still kind of scraping by. And so I really do think that unionization in the workforce is an important thing to make sure that workers have some power to say, set their wages.
Yeah, and I guess I always thought the power is I won't work for you. You offer me $6 an hour to work at Dunkin' Donuts. I'm not doing it. I'm going somewhere else. But I guess I don't quite understand that power struggle.
Yeah, I think it would be better if we had, jobs that offer, people longer term employment and give workers more power. And if they had more power in their workforce, I think they would, stay longer. And so usually when you look at, businesses that are unionized or even worker co-ops, the workers tend to be happier and they tend to stay longer because they feel like they have some control over the work output and they have some control over their workforce.
I always felt that way. And then recently, when we were talking to our human resources department here in town, we mentioned that the municipal positions we have pensions. And the head of our HR group said, nobody cares anymore. Which stunned me, because to me, if I'm a teacher, a police officer, a firefighter, being able to retire with a pension has got to be one of the most important things in the world. I mean, I just retired in November. I got a lunch. The next day, that's it. I'm done. No more income coming in. So I'm amazed that the younger generation doesn't see the value in the pensions we offer.
There's definitely a different generational mindset. I think that I don't think it's just attitudes. I think it also reflects kind of the workplace kind of conditions, that more and more there's jobs that aren't the type of job that you would stay for your entire life.
Do you think it's just they don't expect to? I mean, my first job, I stayed 10 years. I just assumed I was going to stay longer. Maybe it's that they don't think they're going to be set up for 10 years.
I think so. I think maybe that there's maybe less of those jobs that you can spend your entire career at, and there are less companies that you can, or companies that traditionally hired, people or kept people employed for their entire careers. I think that is unfortunately not as common as it was.
Is that a Northeast thing, or, I mean, when I think of the square states,
Right.
And you see that there's father, son, or grandfather all worked at the same plant, and you don't see that here.
No. I mean, it was common in, auto manufacturing.
Yeah.
In the Midwest, but even a lot of those plants are moving to different parts of the country, and they're a lot of the employment sectors now are technological based, and so there's a data annotation industry growing. So the data annotation industry is building data sets to feed artificial intelligence models. And a lot of these workers are, working for at home and are on contract, and these are kind of like short-term working opportunities. And so a lot of the newer industries are also kind of more temporary contract-based, in which people don't, stay their entire careers.
Data centers.
Yes.
All of a sudden, they've become the villains. When I think of a data center, I think of $60,000, $70,000 positions to support computers. What's the bad thing about data centers?
Yeah. So from an economic perspective, they actually don't provide many jobs, because they'll provide a lot of jobs in the construction phase, but once the data centers are constructed, they're only providing, a handful of jobs for maintaining the data centers. So these are usually, unpersoned, automated places. So the problem with data centers is the energy output required to keep them running. So in Massachusetts, NSTAR and Eversource have received requests for about 2 gigawatts of electricity, which is about 85% of what Massachusetts households currently use. So this is for an additional allocation. So this would be a huge increase.
So we're using 2 gigawatts to supply Massachusetts. And
for
they
85, yeah.
And they want, round numbers.
Right.
They want an extra 2 gigawatts just for data centers?
Right.
Is that a bad thing?
We don't know if we have the capacity for it, and it's a bad thing in the sense that it's going to increase the electricity costs for people around the data centers.
Okay, that's where I'm getting confused, because the reason I say is it a bad thing is, if I want something, I pay for it.
Right.
So you sit there and say, we want 2 gigawatts of extra power. Cool, it's gonna cost you $100 above and beyond.
Right.
Can't we charge these companies to put in the extra power?
Well, you can charge them, but what happens is that the energy network, especially if it becomes overpowered, then people within that network who aren't connected to the data center at all, they just live in the same kind of energy network, they end up paying more. So the costs become socialized.
Well, that doesn't sound fair.
And that's not fair. And then there are other costs too that are externalized outside of the data center. So in Northern Virginia, there's a thing called Data Center Row. It's this high concentration of data centers. And there have been public health studies conducted looking at Data Center Row. And they found that there are a lot of negative health externalities. So these data centers, they have energy generators that produce particulates in the air, which can be carcinogenic. It can cause health problems in terms of people's breathing. The data centers themselves, they use a lot of water. So especially AI data centers, they need a lot of water
Well, that's a problem.
to cool the GPUs. So the GPUs are what powers the AI models.
We don't have enough water, right? We're on a water
Right.
restriction already.
Right. And so a lot of the well water for communities that have well water they're running dry because the water is going to these AI data centers.
See, that's what I don't understand. I am paying a fixed amount, right, a certain amount for my electricity. Somebody comes in and says they want to add to that. Well, the cost to add to that and keep me whole is $100.
Yeah.
Well, we don't want to pay $100. Well, I want to be young, thin, and have hair.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get what I want unless I pay for it.
Right. And so the companies that set up the data centers, they're not always like the big tech companies. They're sometimes like third-party providers. And so the third-party providers, they're going to be paying for X amount of energy, but sometimes they use more than that, or by using X amount of energy, it increases the cost of other people's utility bills because the system becomes overburdened. So it does lead to like a socialization of costs. So we were talking about the data center row, like people that live near these data centers are reporting increasing utility bills. The data centers themselves, they create this humming noise in the air, and people are reporting that they can't live in their houses anymore because of this. The humming noise is too loud. And in some parts of the country, electricity companies are coming in and they're forcing people out of their homes through eminent domain in order to build power lines directed to these data centers. And so there's this popular revolt going on in the country right now against data centers. And people are showing up to town halls saying that we don't want this in our community when a data center is proposed. And even in Mansfield here in Massachusetts, town meeting just voted a preventative ban on data centers. So there was no proposals for data centers, but they were looking at what was going on in the country, and they said, we don't want that here in our community. And they also did a ban on, they set a limit to the amount a data center can output in terms of energy output. And so the ban also prevents most data centers in general. So a lot of the data centers aren't necessarily AI data centers. They could be data centers that help out with computations, for instance. And so Mansfield said, we don't want most data centers in Mansfield. And this amendment passed unanimously.
But I would think if you went out west in Massachusetts, there's plenty of land out there where nobody's around. The humming, whatever, isn't going to affect anybody. Like Virginia, if you're talking about the Reston, Springfield area, yeah, that's like us inside of 128. There's no room at the inn. You're not just going to plop down a data center and not affect people. But they can go out. I mean, if you've ever driven from Annandale to that's the northeast part of Virginia, because I used to live there, and I used to say I'm from Virginia, and everybody down south said, no, you're from D.C. Because everywhere around Nova, Northern Virginia, was different. You'd have to move the data centers where it doesn't affect people. So I guess it surprises me, because when we grew up, everybody said Fortune Boulevard in Milford will never be developed, because it was all granite. 20 years later, somebody came up with a way of chewing up the granite and selling it, and all of a sudden we have Fortune Boulevard. So I'm surprised, because if you plan it right, there's got to be a way of saying, look, you want this extra power? It's going to cost you $100. Well, we don't want to pay $100. Okay. Then you don't get the extra power. Go somewhere else.
Another problem is that there's no accounting of how much electricity and water these data centers are using. And so there's no federal regulation that says that these data centers have to report on how much energy or water they're using. And so there's legislation in Congress right now called the Clean Cloud Act that would mandate the data centers to report how much energy and water they're using, and would also impose a carbon tax. So the more carbon they emit in the air, they would receive a tariff on that.
But it sounds like the real problem is we're not setting the rules up right. You know, it's going to cost you $100, Josh. Well, I don't want to pay it. But go to another state. Go somewhere else.
Right.
But to not negatively impact the ratepayers now means there's $100 worth of improvements. And maybe I'm going to charge $110 and improve the system a little bit better for everybody.
And one of the problems is that the governments from local governments to state level to the federal government, they're becoming captured in terms of the big tech companies' influence. And so the big tech companies right now are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars into, for instance, Democratic congressional primaries around the country, trying to
Buy their way in.
And get candidates who are not going to regulate data centers and are going to impose a weak federal framework for AI regulation that would override any.
And I can see the temptation, because years ago, I have to admit, we were all tempted in Milford when a group came in and said, we want to build a casino in Milford. It's going to be $1 billion investment, and we're going to guarantee you $30+ million a year in tax revenue. Well, back then our budget was a little over 100 million, 120 million. Coming in offering me 30, I got to admit it was tempting. But when we looked at it, we said, that's not good for Milford. Because they kept saying, I remember when David Nunes came on the show, talk about the casino, I said, why should I vote for this? He said, it'll make Milford better. I said, wait a minute, I like Milford the way it is. And you can't tell me that a casino isn't going to impact our town. Well, it'll be better. I said, define better. Better is different. So I can imagine putting a big AI data center in the middle of Milford would change everything.
Right. I don't think there are really much benefits at all in putting an AI data center in Milford or anywhere else.
Well, donations to the representatives,
Right.
tax revenue. I can't think of much else.
Yeah, so I do think that at the very minimum we should be mandating that these data centers report how much energy and water they're using. And I would be supportive of a moratorium on the construction of new AI data centers. And so,
Until we know what the impact is.
until we know what the impact is, because this is a recent phenomenon. The health consequences are just being studied right now, within the past couple of years. And, the federal government doesn't really do a good job in responding to new technologies and new advances.
Well, no, it's like you talk about water, the aquifer. There is an aquifer. We all stick our straws into the aquifer and drink from it. You put a big straw in there, it's going to take
Right.
the aquifer down. And right now, we were sitting here before the summer even hits, and we're saying no outside water use. You got to study the impact on the aquifer, because
Yeah.
if you drained it in Hopkinton at the beginning of Echo Lake, it's going to have effects down here in Milford. So I don't understand why the government is so good at spending money on studies, why they can't set up a committee and decide, here are the things that will be impacted. You have to answer these questions before we consider giving you a building permit.
And voters in the towns are, standing up and they're saying, we don't want this in our communities, and they're voting for these prohibitions. Not just in Mansfield, but also in Lowell. There was a vote that was just taken, and I think that's pretty inspiring, because it's not a partisan issue. This is just an issue of people in their communities wanting accountability. And
Well, it's interesting that a place like Lowell, because they've been having budget challenges for a long time, and it's got to be real tempting.
Right.
'Cause I got to admit, $30 million a year increased Milford revenue was tempting for a short period of time, till we started looking at what it meant to the town's character. And at that point, town turned it down. There was a lot of people like me that said, I like Milford. I was born here, raised here. I don't want to change it within reason. Overturn Citizens United.
yes.
What is that?
So Citizens United was a Supreme Court decision in 2010 that opened the floodgates to political spending. So it essentially said that corporations have individual speech rights, like as if they were people, and that Congress could not place limits on the
Amount of money?
They can spend. And so what happened with Citizens United and some subsequent decisions, that the Supreme Court allowed for the creation of these called super PACs. So these are groups that can spend unlimited money in elections, given some constraints, so they can't coordinate with individual campaigns. And what it really did was it increased the political power of the wealthiest. And so we have right now in Democratic primaries across the country, we have what I would call a new oligarchy emerging that is trying to pick and choose winners in Democratic primaries. And among these forces are artificial intelligence companies. So the big ones such as OpenAI and Anthropic, they have their own political action committees that are spending money in these elections. There's the crypto industry. So the crypto industry is forming PACs that want, more or less regulation on crypto trading. And there's the APAC, so the American Israel Political Action Committee, and so they're trying to fund candidates that are pro-Israel that don't want to cut off funding to Israel. And together, these forces are having a profound impact on our democracy. And so, there are constitutional bans on overturning Citizens United. Constitutional amendments that would overturn Citizens United. One's called the Citizens Over Corporations Amendment, which is in Congress right now. And that would kick the process of amending the Constitution to states and assert that, in fact, Congress can set limits on individual spending in elections and corporate spending in elections. And when I started this campaign, that was my number 2 issue. I said, we need Medicare for all, and we have to overturn Citizens United. And the current congressperson in this district, Representative Auchincloss, he did not support the Medicare for All Act, and he did not support the constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. And that's because he's taken over $500,000 in corporate PAC spending since he's been in office. And
Now, my understanding was, if you win an election, for votes on Friday, it's closed, you won Friday, you get the whole weekend off, and then Monday you start raising money. Isn't that the fundamental problem?
Right.
That the way the system is set up, you need a plethora of donors with dump trucks of money to win?
Right. There's too much money in politics, and that's why we've been advocating for, first of all, overturning Citizens United. And that would allow Congress to set limits on the amount that corporations can spend in elections. And Representative Auchincloss, through 16 months through this congressional session, did not co-sponsor any of the constitutional amendments to overturn Citizens United. And as of last week, he has co-sponsored the Citizens Over Corporations amendment that would overturn Citizens United. And so that's a consequence of our progressive campaign, because we're running on a people-powered campaign trying to reject corporate PAC. So I'm not taking any corporate PAC money. I'm not taking any APAC money. I'm not taking any crypto money. I'm not taking any money from healthcare executives. I'm not taking any money from Palantir executives. I'm not taking any pharmaceutical money. This is all powered through small dollar contributions from individuals, mostly in this district. So we have an average contribution of $32, and 84% of it comes from within the district. And that's really important because these are not special interests funding the campaign. It's just people who really do care about policies such as Medicare for All and want people to have health insurance in this country.
Now, do we not feel it in Massachusetts because you don't see the big Republican against Democrat? I mean, if all 12 Republicans from Massachusetts got together, they're not going to have a big impact on the election. Is that why we don't, at least I don't feel the super PAC money and the PAC money jumping in, but is it on Democratic primaries that it jumps in?
It's happening now in the Senate race between Markey and Moulton. I don't know if you noticed, but you'll start seeing attack ads on TV and on digital media. And if you look at the fine print, it's always a PAC with kind of like an innocuous sounding PAC, Citizens for a fair economy or something like that. And we don't know where the money is coming from, and that's another problem. A lot of these PACs are dark money PACs. So they're receiving contributions, but we don't know the sources of those contributions. We don't know who's donating, what industry they're in.
So the Reagan 11th Commandment, do no harm to fellow Republicans, doesn't count for Democrats?
It does not. They are they are battling over the airwaves right now, and it's pretty early on, and I think you're going to see more of that. And I don't I don't think the ads themselves are a problem. I think what's the problem is that the ads are being financed by these dark money political action committee groups where you don't know who's funding them, right? We don't know what kind of special interests are funding these groups. We don't know what the agenda is.
But if you took out the PACs,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know enough about it,
Mhm.
but then don't you also have to take out the union contributions?
So the unions can form PACs, um, and in my campaign, I say I won't receive money from corporate PACs, and I think that's an important distinction because there are unions and issue campaigns that can form PACs, and none of them are supporting our campaign. But if they did, I wouldn't object to that. But I think really as long as unions or issue campaigns, they're clear on who's funding them and what their finances are. I think that's less of a problem than these dark money PACs where you don't get to see who's funding
Yeah,
them.
that surprises me because if you form a PAC, I would think you have an obligation to say, I got $100 from Joe and I got $20 from Mary,
Mhm.
so that we know who's supporting you.
Yeah, it should be a given, but in this system, there are these groups that are spending money that's untraceable. And so I was just at the Massachusetts Democratic Convention last weekend, and there's a group trying to push the Massachusetts Democratic Party to say no to dark money PACs, to say, oh, you can't run in our primaries if you're the beneficiary of these dark money groups. And that almost has no chance of getting adopted. And that's, because a lot of our establishment politicians rely on these groups for outside funding. It's a lot easier for an incumbent running or a challenger to an incumbent to use a dark money group to attack their opponents, so it's not traceable to the beneficiary of that.
I hate to
ad.
say it, but we could keep going for a while. Last question. I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
It's because the economic pressures that are facing Milford voters, it's a Washington problem. So these are because of choices that are made in Washington by establishment politicians. So by pushing up the Pentagon budget to $1.5 trillion, every dollar that's spent on war and bombs is one less dollar that's spent here in Milford on schools, on public transit, on housing, on education. And so, like we were talking about, a lot of these establishment politicians, they're funded by big money interests, and they're often speaking to the donor class rather than the working class. And so I'm running a campaign that speaks to the working class, and that's why we're talking about Medicare for all, and that's why we're talking about strengthening collective bargaining rights. And so I think Milford voters should vote for our campaign because we're speaking to the issues that they care about rather than the issues that the billionaire donors and the DC class cares
Well,
about.
thank you for coming on. And as the election gets closer, maybe we'll have an update coming. And to our 6 loyal viewers, as always, thank you for joining us. May God bless, and may tomorrow be a better day than today. Good night, all.